In 1972, a woman in Cleveland worked the evening shift at a wire manufacturing plant 6 nights a week. She lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with her mother and 3 children, and she had not seen the inside of a beauty salon in 4 years. But every woman who worked alongside her could not stop staring at her hair. It was thick. It was impossibly dark and glossy. It swung like a heavy velvet curtain every time she turned her head on the factory floor. Her secret was a small tin of vegetable shortening and a bottle of apple cider vinegar she kept on the bathroom shelf. That exact zero-budget combination is number 25 on our list today. These 25 forgotten poor grandma hair care secrets from the 1970s were built from pure desperation and absolute defiance. When the oil crisis hit and the cost of everything doubled overnight, women could not afford to spend $15 at the salon. They reached into their kitchens and their garden sheds instead. They created results that modern $40 conditioners still cannot replicate. Hit that subscribe button right now so we can explore every single one of these completely forgotten hair rituals together. Number 25 is the warm vegetable shortening scalp coating for achieving extreme deep moisture penetration in severely dry, brittle, poverty-damaged hair. Women who worked in dry factory environments or cold outdoor conditions experienced a constant and terrible stripping of the natural oils from their scalp and hair. To counter this completely, frugal grandmothers in the 1970s reached for the large tin of vegetable shortening that sat permanently on the kitchen shelf for cooking. They scooped a tiny amount of the solid white fat and melted it between their warm palms before combing it entirely through their dry and breaking hair from root to end. They covered their heads in a plastic bag saved from the grocery store and sat near the kitchen stove for 30 long, quiet minutes to let the heavy fat fully absorb. The shortening matched the natural sebum of the scalp almost perfectly and repaired the broken hair shaft from the inside outward. When they washed it away with plain dish soap, their hair fell in a heavy, shining wave that completely defied their impoverished living circumstances. Number 24 is the sharp apple cider vinegar final rinse for achieving an absolutely blinding mirror-like gloss on severely dull and damaged hair. Commercial shampoos of the 1970s left a heavy, alkaline residue on the hair that made it look permanently dull and completely unclean even minutes after washing. Grandmothers who understood this completely bypassed the problem with a cup of cheap apple cider vinegar diluted in cold water as their absolute final rinse. They poured this sharp, pungent mixture slowly over every strand of their wet hair after washing, making sure it coated the entire shaft from the root to the very tip. The strong acid instantly collapsed the raised hair cuticle flat against the shaft, sealing in all the moisture and creating a surface that reflected light like a sheet of dark glass. The smell disappeared completely as the hair dried in the cool air near the open apartment window. Their hair possessed a glossy, healthy swing that looked exactly like the expensive salon blowouts they could never possibly afford. Number 23 is the raw whole egg deep conditioning mask for flooding severely protein-depleted hair with desperately needed strength and complete structural repair. When hair begins to snap and break along the shaft, the problem is almost always the same. The protein structure of the hair itself has been destroyed by heat, by harsh soap, and by the nutritional deficiency caused by poverty and prolonged physical stress. Grandmothers in the 1970s understood this on an entirely intuitive level, even without the scientific terminology to describe it. They cracked 2 raw eggs into a small bowl and whisked them together before applying the thick yellow mixture entirely through their dry and breaking hair. They wrapped their heads tightly in a warm, damp towel and sat still for 20 quiet minutes while the egg proteins deeply penetrated every crack in the damaged hair shaft. When they rinsed it away with cold water, their hair felt completely transformed, heavy and dense and impossibly strong, exactly like the hair of a woman half their age. Number 22 is the flat beer rinse for adding an enormous and completely extraordinary amount of body and fullness to completely limp and lifeless, poverty-thinned hair. Flat beer was something that existed in almost every household in America during the 1970s, and frugal grandmothers absolutely refused to waste a single drop of it. They left an open bottle of cheap beer sitting on the counter overnight until all the carbonation had completely disappeared, then poured it over their clean and wet hair as a final conditioning rinse. The natural hops and the brewer's yeast in the beer coated every individual hair shaft and slightly swelled it along its entire length, creating the appearance of dramatically thicker and much fuller hair. Women who had spent years mourning their thin, limp, defeated hair discovered that this completely free kitchen trick gave them the voluminous, bouncy hair they had always desperately wanted. It dried with an incredible body and swing that no commercial volumizing product of the entire era could ever properly match or replicate. Number 21 is the thick castor oil scalp massage for completely stopping severe hair thinning and powerfully stimulating dormant and exhausted hair follicles back into life. The terrible stress of the 1970s economy caused massive hair thinning in millions of women who were managing entire households on dramatically reduced and completely unpredictable incomes. They could not afford the hair loss treatments advertised in women's magazines, but they had access to something that worked far better than any of those expensive commercial products. Every Saturday evening, grandmothers carefully parted their thinning hair and pressed a tiny drop of extremely thick, dark castor oil directly into the exposed scalp along each part. They massaged it fiercely for 10 full minutes using the firm pads of their fingertips, creating a powerful surge of blood circulation directly into the weakened and struggling hair follicles. The heavy ricinoleic acid in the oil nourished the follicles from the outside, while the vigorous physical massage stimulated them powerfully from within. Women who used this ritual consistently every single week reported dramatic new hair growth within 3 months without spending a single dollar on commercial treatments. Number 20 is the raw onion juice scalp treatment for forcing stubborn, dormant hair follicles back into active and vigorous growth where nothing else had worked. This is the trick that grandmothers swore by in whispers because it seemed far too strange and far too simple to be real, and yet the results were completely undeniable and entirely consistent. They grated a raw yellow onion over a clean bowl and squeezed the sharp, pungent juice through a piece of cheesecloth directly onto their exposed and thinning scalp. They worked the onion juice into the scalp with their fingertips, concentrating on the areas where the hair was thinning most dramatically, and left it sitting for a full 30 minutes before washing it completely away. The sulfur compounds in raw onion are among the most powerful natural stimulants for the hair follicle that exist anywhere in the entire natural world. Grandmothers did not need a laboratory study to prove this. They simply looked in the mirror after 12 consistent weeks and saw entirely new, fine baby hairs appearing in places that had been completely bare and hopeless for years. Number 19 is the thick, cold mayonnaise deep conditioning pack for restoring extreme moisture and miraculous silkiness to completely destroyed and poverty-damaged hair. Mayonnaise was always available in the refrigerator of a frugal 1970s household because it was cheap, filling, and endlessly versatile in the kitchen. What most modern women have entirely forgotten is that it is also one of the most powerful hair conditioning treatments ever casually discovered. Grandmothers applied a thick, heavy layer of cold mayonnaise directly to their dry hair, concentrating on the desperately damaged ends and the most brittle and breaking sections. They twisted their coated hair up under a plastic shower cap and left the mixture sitting for a full 45 minutes while they went about their other household tasks. The egg yolks in the mayonnaise provided a massive dose of hair-repairing protein, while the heavy oil content created a deep moisture seal that lasted for days after washing. Their hair felt like raw silk when they rinsed it away, and it held that extraordinary softness through an entire brutal week of harsh environmental exposure. Here is where things get deeply personal about the 1970s and what it truly meant to be a woman trying to maintain her physical dignity during that specific and incredibly difficult decade. The 1970s were not the carefree era that nostalgia has made them out to be for the vast majority of ordinary American women. The oil crisis of 1973 tripled the price of basic goods overnight. Inflation destroyed the purchasing power of working-class households in a matter of desperate months. Women who had managed on already tight budgets suddenly found those budgets cut in half again. Every single dollar that could be saved was saved. Salon appointments were abandoned completely. Commercial beauty products disappeared entirely from the weekly grocery list. And yet these women absolutely refused to let their hair look broken and defeated. That refusal was not vanity. It was something far more important and far more profound than vanity could ever be. When your children are hungry, and your husband has been laid off and the heating bill has not been paid, the simple act of maintaining beautiful hair is an act of absolute and complete defiance. It is a fierce declaration to the world that poverty has not consumed everything, that there is still something inside you that belongs entirely to yourself, and that no amount of financial devastation can ever take away. These forgotten pantry hair treatments were psychological armor just as much as they were cosmetic rituals. Every woman who sat quietly in her kitchen with a tin of shortening and a bottle of vinegar was performing an act of quiet, fierce, entirely unbending resistance against everything the world was trying to do to her. She was refusing to look like what terrible circumstance was trying to make her. She was insisting on her own beauty, even when absolutely nothing else in her life was working in her favor. That is why these secrets matter. That is precisely why we absolutely need to bring them back. Number 18 is the warm honey and olive oil hot oil treatment for performing a complete overnight restoration of severely damaged and heat-destroyed grandma hair. Before electric hot oil treatment kits were sold in every pharmacy, grandmothers created their own version with 2 ingredients that cost almost nothing and that were already sitting in their kitchen. They heated a small bowl of dark olive oil with a large spoonful of raw honey in a pot of hot water until the mixture was warm but not burning to the touch. They applied this heavy, fragrant mixture entirely through their dry hair from the roots to the very ends and wrapped everything tightly in a warm towel that had been gently heated near the stove. They slept with this mixture on their hair through the entire night and washed it away in the morning with a thorough washing. The combination of olive oil and honey created a moisture barrier so powerful that it could reverse months of heat and environmental damage in a single overnight treatment. Women who use this method once a week maintained the hair of women 20 years younger than themselves without ever visiting a salon. Number 17 is the plain baking soda clarifying wash for stripping the heavy, dull, suffocating buildup of cheap commercial products completely off the hair shaft. The cheap shampoos and hairsprays widely available in the 1970s left a heavy, waxy, completely dull coating on the hair that regular washing could never fully remove on its own. Grandmothers dissolved 2 large tablespoons of plain, cheap baking soda in a cup of warm water and poured it slowly over their wet hair, working it gently into the scalp and through the entire length of the shaft. The mild alkaline properties of the baking soda dissolved the thick wax and heavy residue completely, stripping the hair back to its absolutely clean and natural state. They followed this immediately with the apple cider vinegar rinse to restore the proper acid balance and to seal the clean hair cuticle completely flat and smooth. Women who performed this clarifying ritual once a month reported that their hair looked dramatically brighter, shinier, and several full shades lighter than it had looked under the heavy grey film of accumulated product buildup. Number 16 is the final cold water rinse for collapsing the hair cuticle completely and creating an absolutely blinding and breathtaking natural shine at no cost whatsoever. This is the simplest secret on the entire list and the one that grandmothers used without fail every single time they washed their hair, regardless of anything else they had done. After their final conditioning rinse, they stood under the coldest water they could tolerate for a full 60 seconds, allowing it to run entirely over their hair until every strand was completely cold to the touch. Cold water causes the individual scales of the hair cuticle to collapse flat and lock tightly together, creating a surface so smooth and so perfectly uniform that it reflects light in a single blinding sheet. The difference between hair rinsed in warm water and hair rinsed in cold water is immediately and completely visible to the naked eye. Grandmothers who used this trick consistently every single week possessed a natural shine that modern heat styling and glossing serums have never been able to replicate. Number 15 is the reserved starchy potato cooking water rinse for adding a completely invisible and extraordinary layer of volume and strength to limp and fine hair. When grandmothers boiled potatoes for dinner, they never threw away the heavy, white, starchy water left in the pot. They allowed it to cool completely and then poured it slowly and carefully over their clean and wet hair after washing, working it through every strand from root to tip. The natural starch molecules in the potato water coated each individual hair shaft with a thin, completely invisible layer of strengthening material that made every strand feel heavier, fuller, and dramatically stronger. Women with thin or fine hair who used this treatment consistently discovered that their hair held its set for twice as long as it did without the starch rinse, and that it appeared visually much thicker and much denser than its actual natural state. It was a completely brilliant piece of accidental kitchen chemistry that cost absolutely nothing and produced results that no modern volumizing spray has ever properly equaled. Number 14 is the strongly brewed chamomile tea rinse for creating subtle, beautiful, sun-kissed lighter highlights in naturally dark blonde or light brown hair without any chemical damage. Women who desired the expensive salon highlights they could never afford discovered that a pot of very strong chamomile tea poured over their hair after washing created a slow and completely natural lightening effect that accumulated beautifully over many weeks of consistent use. They brewed a full pot of chamomile using 6 or 7 tea bags and allowed it to cool entirely before pouring it over clean, wet hair and allowing it to sit for 20 quiet minutes before rinsing it completely away. The natural compounds in chamomile reacted with sunlight to gently and gradually lift the color from the hair without any harsh chemical stripping or damage to the hair shaft. After 4 to 6 consistent weekly treatments, women noticed that their hair had developed a warm, glowing, sun-kissed brightness that looked exactly like the professional highlights they had seen in expensive fashion magazines. Number 13 is the strongly brewed black coffee rinse for deepening and completely enriching the natural dark tones in brunette and dark brown, poverty-tired hair. While their lighter-haired neighbors were using chamomile, dark-haired grandmothers in the 1970s were saving the morning's leftover coffee for an entirely different and equally powerful purpose. They allowed a full pot of very strong black coffee to cool completely and poured it slowly over clean, wet hair, working it entirely through every strand from root to end and allowing it to sit for 20 minutes before a final cold water rinse. The natural dark pigments in coffee deposited themselves gently along the hair shaft, deepening and enriching the existing natural color and completely eliminating the reddish or brassy tones that harsh sun exposure constantly left behind. Women who used this treatment once a week maintained the deep, rich, glossy brunette color of their youth for decades longer than women who relied on chemical color treatments that progressively destroyed the health of the shaft. Here is something that the enormous and enormously profitable modern hair care industry absolutely does not want you to deeply think about or fully understand today. Every single treatment on this list costs less than $1 to prepare at home. Most of them cost nothing at all because they are made from the leftovers and the scraps of ordinary daily household cooking. There is no profit margin in leftover potato water. There is no shareholder value in a cup of flat beer. No corporation can build a sustainable brand around cold water poured from a tap. That is precisely why you have never seen a television commercial for any of these treatments. That is precisely why they have been deliberately and completely forgotten by an industry that depends entirely on your ignorance of them for its own survival. The modern hair care aisle in any grocery store or pharmacy contains hundreds of products that promise exactly what these kitchen rituals already deliver for completely free. A $12 bottle of protein reconstructor does what raw eggs do at a fraction of the cost. A $20 hot oil treatment does what olive oil and honey do when heated together in a simple kitchen pot. A $30 volumizing spray does what potato water and flat beer do without any chemical ingredients whatsoever. Every time you bravely prepare a raw egg mask or pour apple cider vinegar over your clean hair, you are quietly refusing to participate in a system that has grown enormously wealthy by convincing women that the solutions to their hair problems are complex, expensive, and impossible to create without professional chemical intervention. The truth, which grandmothers in the 1970s knew perfectly well, is entirely the opposite. Number 12 is the thin layer of petroleum jelly, applied exclusively to the split and broken ends for completely stopping the terrible progression of further breakage up the shaft. Grandmothers in the 1970s understood something that took the professional hair care industry decades to rediscover and package at enormous expense. Split ends cannot be repaired by any treatment whatsoever. They can only be temporarily sealed to prevent them from splitting further up the shaft toward the roots. The cheapest and most effective sealant ever discovered for this specific purpose is plain petroleum jelly, the same product that sold for pennies in every pharmacy across the country. They warmed a tiny amount between their palms and applied it exclusively to the last 2 inches of their hair, coating every single dry and splitting end with a thin, waterproof seal that locked the damage in place. This stopped the split from traveling further up the shaft for weeks at a time and gave the hair a smooth, polished, completely finished appearance without weighing it down or making it appear greasy at the roots. Number 11 is the strongly brewed rosemary water scalp tonic for stimulating blood circulation and maintaining an absolutely healthy and powerfully productive scalp environment.